What's going on, guys? Thanks for joining me this week for another video. This week's video is rather exciting. I have a really good friend of mine and mentor that I'm going to be interviewing. So if you're excited to see this interview and actually hear what it's about, please stay tuned. So let's get into it, huh? So like I mentioned in the intro, I got a really great video today. I'm interviewing a really good friend of mine and mentor, Martin Santiago. I really call him Mr. Santiago. I just called him that. I'm used to calling him that, but he's going to be telling his testimony, and I really hope you guys enjoy this. You know, we kind of barely just scratched the surface. You know, he's got a lot of life experience and a lot of stuff to tell. So I hope you guys enjoy, and without further ado, let's check this out. Welcome, y'all. Thank you for tuning in this week for another video. I have the great privilege and pleasure of interviewing my mentor and friend, Mr. Martin Santiago.
Alex, it's my pleasure.
Thank you for joining me this week. I just want to give you this kind of platform to tell your testimony. But before we even get into that, if you can kind of give my viewers kind of like a background about like what you do and, you know, if you have a family, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm married. I've been married 30 years. I have 4 children. 2 of them are out of the home. And one that's pretty close to being out of the home, and then one that's still in high school. I've been a teacher. I'm in my 22nd year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and like I said, I just turned it over to another brother, but I was at advised the Christian Club for 20 years.
Wow.
In Pittsburgh High. So, yeah, so still in contact with the gentleman that took it over, Mr. Adarento, but it felt like only a couple years.
Wow. Oh, man. Okay. All right. Well, hopping right into it then. Were you raised in a Christian home, or did you kind of become a Christian later on in life? And what did that kind of like look like?
No, I wasn't raised in a Christian. I was raised in a typical Latin Catholic home where mom took us to church. My dad didn't really go to church, even though, you know, he claimed that he believed in God. But so I would say about the age of 17 is when I accepted the Lord. And my sister and my mom shortly after started coming to church too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it was like a trickle-down effect then.
Yeah.
Wow. It started with you, and then you kind of like witnessed to your family and then brought them in too.
Correct.
Wow. Okay, so then you said 17. So then you were still in high school then?
Yes, my junior year in high school.
Wow. So what did that look like then? How did that all kind of like unfold? How did you, you know, become a Christian for that?
Well, like I said, I was a student at Pittsburgh High, and just really frustrated with a lot of the sports politics, and then I didn't really have an advocate in my dad in that sense, you know, because from where he was coming from, a person that barely had a 6th grade education, educated himself once he came to the States, he just wanted us to focus on academics. And so we didn't really get a lot of support when it came to sports. So I felt like I had to like deal with these coaches and these grown men without an advocate. Long story short, so I ended up transferring to our rival high school, Antioch High School, only to find out that the politics were very similar or maybe worse, you know. But God did give me favor enough to be on the basketball team. You know, the funny story is, I used to work at a donut shop called Winchell's. And so, you know, at that time, the donut shop, whatever was left over, you throw away or take home or whatever. So I'd come home with, greeted by my brother and sister with all these donuts. Well, I would just bring them to school. And so, so I was like the donut guy. So what was funny is, so the season's halfway over and the paperwork finally comes in for me to be able to play. And I get voted to be on the team. And, from what I heard, one of the guys on the team was like whose position is he going to take at this point? And God brings us donuts every day. So that's how I got accepted onto the basketball team halfway through my junior year. So
wow.
And I still have a relationship with my coach, Coach Whitman. So I get to see him every once in a while. So that's pretty cool. Wow. So in fact, I have to show you. I have a baseball in here when he got voted into the Antioch High School Hall of Fame. As a baseball coach, I got to go to the banquet, and so he gave all of his guests like an autographed baseball. Oh, wow. And so that was pretty cool. I have that here in my office.
Wow. All right. Well, then I guess moving right along. So now that you're a Christian, and then when did you kind of get married, and how did that,
Oh, dude. Well, because I used to do Christian rap. And so long story short, so I'm living in California, but I'm doing some music in the Tampa area. And the assistant pastor pulls me aside and says he has a word from God for me. You take those things with a grain of salt. And it's like, okay, what you got? And then he was like, I feel like the Lord's telling me when you go home, God is going to show your wife. And so, I mean, can you imagine, is it her? Is it her? Is it her? So he was a false prophet for a whole year. And so, fast forward 6 months, my family moves to Miami. And then the following summer, a year later, I'm on tour. So I'm actually in California, in San Francisco, recording my third album. And then I'm on my way back home to Florida, to Miami. So I was on my way home. But it just instead of going from Florida to California, I'm going from California to Florida. So but I'm on my way home, and there was a church in New Mexico where when we did the concert there, the pastor wasn't there, and he wanted to meet me. And so, because we were on our way to a church that they'd helped plant, and that church had gotten robbed of their sound equipment, so we were on our way to do their concert. Meanwhile, my wife is coming with her brother and his wife. And so the pastor that wanted to meet me and my brother-in-law were married to sisters. Oh, wow. So we were all in the same house. And I remember seeing my wife like, wow, okay, that's pretty cool. But I'm in ministry, so I got to... But then the funny thing, too, is, because at that time, the majority of the hip-hop artists were African-American or black. So she thought I was the manager. Oh. Because I came, hi, how you doing? I'm Martin, nice to meet you. And so I still think that's funny. But yeah, and then she found out, no, he's the guy, he's the rapper. So, but... Wow. Yeah.
And the rest is history, as they say.
The rest is history. Well, here's the funny thing, too, is how that all kind of culminated is we had like these cross necklaces that we would sell. And so I had one of my own. You wear the merch and people want to get it. So I'm wearing it, and then people would ask me for mine. And I said, no. I said, this was mine. I go, I'm cool. So long story short, I kind of felt impressed upon my heart to give this cross necklace at this time to she wasn't my wife yet, but to my wife. Okay, so I'm trying to be like real cool about it. And so my DJ was like, dude, everybody on tour has been asking him for that, and he gave it to you. And I'm like, Mark, man, be cool. I'm trying to be slick here. And then the funny thing, too, is I find this out later, how God works on both ends. And she was like, because God was working on her heart. And so she told the Lord, if he's to be my husband, have him give me that necklace.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So it was an answered prayer on her
Yes,
end.
yes.
Oh, wow. And then that was kind of like, for you, it was like giving the Letterman jacket. You know?
Yeah. So,
wow.
well, the funny thing too, see, then I at that time my album was on cassette, so you know how outdated that is. That's before CDs. It was a cassette, and so
a cassette is actually what you.
yes. So my wife she wasn't my wife yet, but she bought the cassette. We weren't even anything at that point. Mm-hmm. Just somebody that we knew. Mm-hmm. She bought the cassette to send to her brother. Mm-hmm. Her mom sees the cassette, and she felt impressed upon the Lord that this is your son-in-law. Well, she takes the CD and or the cassette and throws it across the room. My daughter is not marrying a rapper, but she told my wife that I know who you're going to marry. My wife was like, who? She had no idea that my mother-in-law was referencing the cassette. And then, then after we got engaged, or we're getting ready to get engaged, she told her mom, I met this guy, and she was like, it's that rapper guy. She was like, how'd you know? I said, the Lord already told me. And, because like I said, I was marrying the only daughter. So the Lord had to tell Mama, so. But me and her, we're really cool to this day. Yeah, I call her Franny. Her name is Frances.
See, that's really, that kind of leads me into my next question. Something in your life that kind of, where you can kind of point to, oh, this was God. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, this was God.
Just making the transition into being a teacher, that was completely the Lord. Because if you can imagine, I was studying and to get a degree in accounting, you're living off of $7,000 a year, and just, you can get tired of being not having money in your pocket. And so I graduated, and you graduate, you know that, like, dude, I got the degree in the wrong thing. Okay. And so I remember going to, because I went to New Mexico State, and I remember we moved closer to Albuquerque area because there's more jobs. And I remember going to the University of New Mexico to talk to somebody, and I talked to the wrong person because I thought that I'd have to go to school for a year, which was the truth. They were like, no, you'd have to go to school for 4 more years. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to sell my wife and going to school for 4 more years. So that was just like, the idea of me becoming a teacher, it felt like too far, too distant, too impossible. So that when God actually made it happen, I remember my first handful of years of teaching, I remember pinching myself. Just I couldn't believe that transition happened because it literally felt impossible.
Wow. Okay. Take me through, because I first met you as the Christian Club advisor.
Correct.
So take me through that process. How did you become the Christian Club advisor?
Well, I was in my second year of teaching. I felt a burden from the Lord to come back to my hometown in California. So I come back, and my first year teaching, I'm just like trying to get my feet wet and just trying to focus on being a good teacher. Well, there was a gentleman in the math department that was over the Christian Club. And so going into my second year, so the school year was 03-04, he pulls me aside and says, hey, I got stuff that I've got, that I'm committed to. He goes, would you take the Christian Club? So I'm humbled that he would even ask me. And I'm like, oh, man, of course. So I take it, and long story short, I felt like I wasn't a good advisor. I felt like I ran the club into the ground. I just, I had a lot of zeal, but it was a lot of zeal based without, like, knowledge or practicality. We went through, like, 4 different presidents that first year.
Unchanneled zeal?
Unchanneled zeal.
Yeah. It's just like, I got all this stuff, and there was no, like, direction.
Correct. Well, there was direction, but I think sometimes, too, in a spiritual, you got to be able to read the room. What is God saying to do in this? And I think sometimes pastors get caught up, like they come out of a church where God's doing an amazing work, and then God sends them, and they try to make it exactly like the place they left. I mean, I'm sure there's some principles you're going to take there because those were here, but it's a whole new work that God is doing. Yeah. So that was just kind of like my short-sightedness. I just, this is a whole new work. So I just came in just, with my guns blazing and just ready, fire, aim.
So that wasn't even really initially on the books for you. You weren't trying to be a Christian club.
Oh, no, that was the last thing.
That was the last thing on your mind.
I thought I was coming to plant a church, which I eventually did. But that was, there's things that you had visions of being on the radio, doing various outreaches and stuff like that. Advising a Christian club was nowhere near on the radar at all.
Isn't it funny how God works?
Oh, man. Yeah, man. But that was the coolest thing he could have did.
Because the year 2004, 2005 is when I met him in the Christian club. That was the last thing on his mind of what he wanted to do. And that's where I actually met him, and that's where he kind of ministered to me. Me coming to high school kind of straight out of, being homeschooled, independent study, kind of like the initial transition phase from being homeschooled to public school. But I found out that there was a Christian club, and I'm like, oh, one thing that I know, being a Christian, oh, there's a club for that. Yes, I can kind of attach to that and kind of at least make friends with fellow Christians. So that really made the first year easy. So something that you can kind of see that might be on your list, and you don't know why God's bringing this or presenting this to you. Maybe it's for somebody else so that you can minister to somebody else. So just keep that in mind. All right. So moving forward, is there anything else that kind of also happened that you're like, yes, that's God, totally God, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that was him. He showed up in some sort of miraculous way, huge way that, out of my control.
Oh, definitely, because like I said, I'm by the time you came to the club, I was completely broken. Mm-hmm. I inherited like 20 kids in the Christian club, and there was one left, Melvin. And then you, your sister, Kathy, Jessica, and Jim, the Fab Five. And, and so, being able to love on you guys and then now have a rear view look at it, looking at, because then your junior year and your senior year, you became the club president. Because remember, I had the amazing gift of taking the club of 20 and bringing it down to 1. And then we had 5 times the growth weeks with the 5 people. So
I'm like, okay, we're gonna start over.
But then, and under your leadership, it grew to about 15, 20. About the low 20s, 25. Wow. And then, when you graduated, I was super sad. I was like, oh my gosh, my leader's gone. And then, but the people that you had influenced that came after you, the club grew into like the 30s. And then at that time, we built a new high school. It was around 2010, 2011. Mm-hmm. We had to use a double wide classroom. Mr. Nordestad opened up his double wide classroom because we couldn't fit everybody in my room. There was over 100 kids coming to Christian Club. I was just into the point where like that year, because like I said, everybody was like the Christian Club, and then, it was like, and then our candidates win homecoming, mm-hmm. Because it's based on the clubs and to the point where like, it's like we shocked the world, mm-hmm. So it was just like, and then that 3-year run, I think our girls won it 3 years in a row. And then I think our guys won it 2 out of 3.
Oh, wow.
And then to the point where like one of our candidates was the quarterback. And I remember the leadership teacher calling me because he couldn't believe that the quarterback was going to Christian Club. And he was a senior. I'm like, he was coming to Christian Club when he was a junior. When he was the backup quarterback. What are we talking about? And he would come to my classroom and I'd get a chance to pray for him every Friday. He'd come at lunch and we'd pray. And, but just watching that it was literally a revival on campus. It exploded.
Won't he do it? Won't he do it?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh, man. There's so many stories just in that alone. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
What about outside of high school? Outside of that, how have you seen God kind of show up, you know, apart from that, just in your personal life?
Just like I said, in a lot of various ministries, just watching God provide that. I remember like when my dad passed away in 2009. He hadn't passed away. I had like a debt that I was banking at the place that I owed the money, and they ended up taking all the money that I owed them out of the account. Mm-hmm. So I have like $700 left in my account, and the rent is $1,500. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. I called a pastor friend of mine, and he's like, we're just talking about money. He goes, just call your creditors. He goes, you'll be surprised at how they work with you, especially if you have a consistent payment history. Just explain to them. So they all work with me. And then my landlord, who was, wasn't necessarily a tyrant, but he was a tough guy. Mm-hmm. And I explained to him what had happened. And so the agreement was that I would just pay an extra $500 for the next 3 months. And then that would, at that point, we had already been living in the house 5 years, and we always paid on time. Mm-hmm. So somebody had given me like a benevolence card, and I was getting ready to fly out of town because my father had passed away. And I put this benevolence card right on the refrigerator because I'm trying to hurry up and get out of town. And, I know I need an extra $500, but I'll deal with that later. Mm-hmm. So I put this benevolence card there. So I go do the funeral and everything like that, bury my dad. And, so by the time I come back, it's almost at the end of the month, and I need this extra $500. All right, Lord, I don't know how you're going to provide that. And I said, I'm going to trust you. And then, I said, I have this benevolence card. So I go ahead and read it, and I get the card, and there's a check for $500 in there. And I was thinking, like, why didn't I open it up before I left? I could save myself all this stress, all this, wow. Got it already taken care of it before I left on the trip.
Oh, man. Man.
And those people didn't even know that I had that need. Uh-huh. They had no idea.
I could sit and I could talk to you for hours, story after story, about how God has showed up in your life. But I'll keep it brief. I would love to have you back on again at some point.
Oh, I'd love to be back on any time.
But I guess just for my viewers, what would you say? What advice would you give them as far as how to keep life simple?
We talk about that stuff. It just like I said, I just came back from a leadership retreat for the King movement, a ministry I'm involved in. And one of the things that just kind of resonated on my mind, because like some of the compliments I was getting or feedback, they're really impressed on how I've pushed through different health issues and stuff like that, and I've managed to show up. Mm-hmm. So I'm just really encouraging people, be there. Mm-hmm. Like I said, the two instances I've seen in the Bible where Moses' father-in-law's encouraging Moses to help alleviate the load is to find, able men that are amongst him. Mm-hmm. The second instance is in the book of Acts when the Hellenistic Jews were being neglected in the food distribution. And again, they were looking for able men amongst them. Mm-hmm. And so, so you look around, who's amongst us here? And that's how ministry flows, because like I said, you're there, you're available. And, they were saying the comment that when they're looking for new people for ministry, they look at people that are doing stuff. Because a lot of times too, we try to get somebody engaged, rightfully so, that isn't doing anything. But usually there's a reason why that person's not doing anything. Mm-hmm. That's not where their heart is, where somebody that's doing something, mm-hmm. Like I said, they take it and run with it, and with zeal, and so if I can encourage you guys to just be a blessing where you are. There's the term, bloom where you're planted. Like I said, be a blessing to your pastor, be a blessing to your fellow congregants, to where they see that there's a level of excitement, mm-hmm. And just be amongst them, because you're also amongst them when they're not only for ministry. There's time when people are grieving and they're hurting. They just need somebody to pray for them, or somebody just to listen to them. Yeah. Be there.
You don't have
You
to
know.
solve the problem.
Yeah.
They just need an ear sometimes. Yeah.
How many times have you heard that person was here for me?
Yeah.
You know, you can't put a value on that.
Yeah.
You know,
just show up.
Just show up.
Yeah.
So,
keep it simple.
Keep
show
it simple.
up.
Yep.
Thank you so much, and thank you guys for tuning in, and comment below. Let me know you guys want him back on the channel. I mean, I would love to have him back. So thank you so much.
All right, man, Alex.
All right. So I hope you guys really enjoyed that interview, as I did. I did asking him these questions and really just talking to him. Like I mentioned in there, we barely just scratched the surface. I mean, he's got so much life experience and so much experience and knowledge in general that, I mean, we could be talking for hours. But I'd like to have him on back sometime. So, I mean, comment below, let me know what you guys thought. And remember what he said, you know, how to keep life simple. Just show up, be available, be available to those people who need you, you know, just be there. So thank you guys so much for tuning in this week, and until next week, guys, stay safe and be blessed.